Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, March 6, 2025. The kind of night where the rain doesn't fall in sheets, but drifts softly, endlessly, painting the streets in silver reflections. Streetlights glowed against wet asphalt, and a faint mist clung to the air. It was late, but the city hadn't gone quiet. You could still hear the hum of buses, the occasional laughter of students walking home, and the gentle hiss of tires cutting through the rain. On the campus of the University of Pittsburgh, the library lights still burned. Through its tall windows, shadows of students moved, some hunched over laptops, others flipping through thick textbooks. Among them was a familiar face, a 20-year-old student named Sudiksha Konanki, a pre-medical student, bright, focused, the kind of person everyone described as disciplined beyond her years. She had a reputation for working late, for sitting by the same table every evening, for never missing her parents' call at night. But on March 6, 2025, that call would go unanswered. And before the city even woke up the next morning, Sudiksha Konanki would be gone. What happened that night would confound investigators, puzzle the community, and ignite one of Pittsburgh's most haunting disappearance cases in years. Because in a city covered by cameras, surrounded by thousands of people, a young woman somehow vanished, without a sound, without a trace, and without a single clear clue. The rain had started around dusk, steady, quiet like background music to an ordinary day. Students rushed between buildings, shielding themselves with folders and jackets. Inside the library, Sudiksha had spent hours reviewing anatomy notes for an upcoming exam. Her phone, placed neatly beside her notebook, buzzed once around 8:15 p.m., a text from a friend asking if she wanted to grab coffee after studying. She didn't reply right away. She usually finished where she started. At 8:37, cameras showed her walking out of the library holding a small black umbrella, a backpack on her shoulders. Outside, puddles shimmered under the yellow glow of the lamps. Her reflection, caught faintly in the glass doors as she walked away, would be the last confirmed image of her alive. Her route was familiar, a 10-minute walk back to her apartment on Forbes Avenue. But somewhere between the library and that doorstep, the trail went cold. Her phone pinged one final time at 8:46 p.m. near Shenley Drive, a curved stretch of road bordered by trees and open parkland. Then, digital silence. No outgoing messages, no social media activity, no location updates. By 10 p.m., her roommate noticed she hadn't come home. By midnight, her parents' calls went straight to voicemail. And by dawn, the small apartment that once echoed with her soft laughter was filled only with worry. It's moments like these, small, invisible moments, when life shifts, when a regular night becomes something entirely different, when one missed call becomes a headline. But before we talk about what was found, or what wasn't, we need to step back, to understand who Sudiksha was. Because behind every missing person case, before the reports and speculation, there is a life. One built from routines, relationships, and small rituals that suddenly stop. And when those stop, the people who loved her are left grasping for patterns, searching for signs they never noticed before. Investigators would later say that Sudiksha's disappearance was both ordinary and impossible. Ordinary because it began like any other missing person case, and impossible because there was no clear point where she was last seen. Her bag wasn't found. Her phone was never recovered. The cameras that could have captured her final steps were fogged with rain. And the night she vanished, no one reported a scream, a struggle, or a sound. Somewhere in that small distance between the library doors and the park's edge, something happened. Something quiet, something no one noticed. And so the question that lingers over this case is simple, yet haunting. How does someone disappear in a city that never stops watching? In the next hour, we'll piece together what's known, the friends who last saw her, the places she visited, the evidence found, and the clues that refuse to make sense.
We'll hear about the search, the false leads, the rumors, and the community that refused to forget her name. This isn't a story of monsters in the dark. It's a story of small decisions, subtle moments, in a rain-soaked night where one life, full of promise, simply stopped moving forward. This is True Crime Unforgettable. And this is the story of Sudiksha Konanki, the girl who walked into the rain and never came back.
Sudiksha Konanki was, by every account, a student shaped by quiet ambition. She wasn't loud or easily noticed in a crowd, but those who knew her say she carried a calm intensity, like someone always thinking one step ahead. Her professors described her as methodical, a word that fit her perfectly. She didn't chase attention, she chased understanding. Born in New Jersey to parents who had moved from India for work, she grew up in a home that valued learning, discipline, and humility. Her father worked in finance, her mother in healthcare. They raised her with the kind of balance that encouraged both independence and responsibility. Books were part of her childhood, the way toys are for most kids. In family photos, she's seen sitting cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by notebooks and laughter. A girl who smiled easily, but who also seemed to think deeply. Her childhood friends remember her as the one who stayed late after class to help others, the one who wrote neatly, spoke softly, and rarely got angry. There was a quiet confidence about her, the kind that didn't need to prove itself. She carried that same demeanor into college, where her focus turned toward medicine, a dream that wasn't born of fantasy, but of steady curiosity. When she joined the University of Pittsburgh, she was ready for the challenge. The first few semesters were difficult. New city, new expectations, long hours that left little time for rest. But Sudiksha adapted. She built her days with structure. Mornings began with a small ritual: green tea, classical music, and her planner, where she wrote down every lecture, assignment, and call she needed to make. Her roommate once said she was the kind of person who found peace in order. She studied hard, but she wasn't consumed by it. She loved small escapes, weekend walks through the park, reading novels between study breaks, and visiting the little cafe near Fifth Avenue, where she always ordered the same thing: black coffee, no sugar. The barista there remembered her as polite and consistent, the kind of customer who said thank you and meant it. Her social circle was small, but meaningful. Two close friends from her pre-med program, Alina and Priya, often studied with her late into the night. They described her as patient, the kind of person who would explain a concept 3 times without irritation. She didn't like shortcuts, Alina recalled later. She believed understanding was better than memorizing. Despite her serious nature, she had a quiet sense of humor, dry, subtle, and disarming. Her friend said she could turn a stressful moment into something lighter with just one sentence. She didn't like being the center of attention, but when she spoke, people listened. There was something grounding about her, something trustworthy. Her professors noticed it too. One described her as the student you don't worry about, the one who just gets things done. Her work ethic was steady, her grades consistent, and her interactions respectful. She didn't miss deadlines, she didn't cause drama, she was, in almost every sense, reliable. And that's what makes her disappearance so unsettling. Because when someone like that vanishes, someone whose entire life runs on structure and communication, the silence feels unnatural. It's not just absence, it's contradiction. On campus, her schedule was almost predictable. Morning classes, library study sessions, lunch with classmates, and evenings spent revising notes or volunteering at the student tutoring center. Her phone records showed the same pattern for weeks: short calls to her parents, texts to friends, Google searches for medical terminology. No erratic behavior, no strange messages, nothing to suggest she was planning to disappear. Her social media was modest, a handful of photos every few months, smiling with classmates, holding coffee in the sunlight, sitting by the university fountain in autumn leaves. Each post captured a piece of her life, but nothing dramatic, nothing performative, just snapshots of a normal, grounded young woman building her future. Her parents often said they never had to worry about her. She was responsible from the beginning, her father said in an interview. She didn't need reminders, she reminded us. It was a proud joke, but one filled with truth. Every night she called home, even if just for a few minutes, to talk about her day, her classes, or what she was cooking. On the night of March 6th, that routine was broken. And that's how her parents knew something was wrong. Friends remember Sudiksha as cautious. She didn't walk alone late at night unless it was a short distance. She used campus shuttle services when she could. She kept her phone charged, her location on for safety, and always texted "home now" when she reached her apartment. That message never came on March 6th. The days leading up to her disappearance were ordinary. She had a test the next week, an upcoming group project, and a volunteer event scheduled that weekend. She'd made plans with her roommate to go grocery shopping. There was no sign of stress beyond the normal college fatigue, no unusual withdrawals, no conflict, no emotional breakdowns. Her professors confirmed she attended all her classes that week. One even recalled a conversation about research programs she wanted to apply for during the summer. She was thinking long-term, the professor said. There was nothing in her demeanor to suggest distress. Investigators later analyzed her digital life, trying to find hidden clues, private messages, drafts, deleted files, but her data painted the same picture her life did: calm, structured, unremarkable in the best way. Her roommate, Lauren, was the last person to see her at the apartment that afternoon. She recalled Sudiksha leaving with her backpack, saying she was heading to the library. She was smiling, she told investigators. She said she wanted to finish her notes early so she could relax over the weekend. It was the kind of casual remark that no one pays attention to until it becomes the last thing a person ever says. After she didn't return that night, Lauren stayed up waiting. She assumed maybe Sudiksha had gone to a friend's dorm or stayed at the library longer than usual. It wasn't until early morning that the worries set in, the kind of worry that begins quietly, like a whisper, and grows louder with every unanswered call. Her friends tried reaching her too, thinking maybe her phone battery had died. But when her parents also couldn't contact her, the situation changed from concern to alarm. By sunrise, a missing person report was filed with campus security. What investigators found most striking was how ordinary her life appeared. No warning signs, no sudden changes, no visible cracks in the rhythm of her days. People who vanish often leave behind confusion, but they usually leave clues too. In Sudiksha's case, there were none. Her parents drove to Pittsburgh immediately, their faces heavy with disbelief. She never missed a call, her mother said quietly. Even if she was tired, she'd say goodnight. That was our thing. In the days that followed, her image appeared on posters around campus. A smiling young woman with intelligent eyes, framed by the soft drizzle of March rain. It was strange for everyone who saw them, because just days earlier, she had walked those same sidewalks, unremarkable and alive. People talk about intuition, about feeling when something is off. Her friend said they never felt that with her. Everything seemed fine. That's what makes this case so haunting. There was no visible beginning to the disappearance, no warning, no tremor before the silence. Sudiksha Konanki's life, at least up to that evening, was a picture of order, of calm purpose, of a young woman doing everything right, and still, somehow, disappearing into the rain.
March 6th, 2025, a Thursday that began like any other. Cold wind, light rain, and the campus wrapped in its familiar routine. For most of the day, Sudiksha followed her usual schedule. Morning lectures, a lab session in the biomedical wing, lunch at the cafeteria, and a long afternoon study block. Nothing unusual, nothing out of pattern. Her classmates remembered her that day as focused but relaxed,
She joked about needing extra caffeine before the upcoming anatomy exam. She smiled, said she'd be fine, and waved goodbye to a few friends before heading toward the library around 5:30 p.m. Security cameras caught her entering Hillman Library at 5:42. She carried her umbrella, a dark backpack, and her phone tucked under her arm. Inside, she swiped her student ID, found her usual corner table on the second floor, and unpacked her notes. She stayed there for nearly 3 hours. At 8:15, she texted her friend Alina, still at the library, finishing notes. "You?" The message was read but not answered immediately. Alina was in a chemistry lab, and she replied later, "Heading home soon. Text me when you leave." That text reached Sudiksha's phone, but it was never opened. At 8:37, library footage shows her standing, adjusting her backpack, and heading toward the exit. She pauses briefly near the door, maybe checking her phone, maybe deciding whether to wait for the rain to lighten, then steps outside. Umbrella opens, a soft blur of motion in the rain. That frame, frozen forever in the archive, marks the last confirmed sighting of Sudiksha Konanki. From that moment, investigators had only fragments, digital footprints, faint memories, and gaps. Her phone connected briefly to campus Wi-Fi until 8:39, then switched to cellular. At 8:46, the final signal registered near Cheveley Drive, a stretch of road bordered by parkland and low stone walls. After that, nothing. No pings, no data, no trace. Between those 9 minutes, something happened. Something so subtle it left no immediate trace in the world of sensors and signals. Investigators reconstructed her route with precision. The walk from Hillman Library to her apartment on Forbes Avenue took about 10 minutes, mostly along well-lit paths. Rain was moderate, visibility fair, foot traffic light. Several cameras aligned the way, yet none caught her passing. Each feed was reviewed frame by frame. Sometimes a blurred umbrella appeared, but color analysis ruled out hers. Some angles were obscured by rain, others temporarily offline due to maintenance. Technology, so often trusted to record everything, had blinked at the wrong moment. Witness interviews filled the next gap. A student leaving the engineering building around 8:50 claimed to have seen a girl in a dark coat walking toward the park. Another mentioned a figure under an umbrella near the bus stop. But their descriptions conflicted. One said blue umbrella, another black. Neither could be certain. Rain distorts memory. Light and shadow play tricks on tired eyes. At 9:10 p.m., Alina tried calling her. No answer. At 9:25, Lauren, her roommate, sent a short message. "You back?" No response. Both assumed she'd gone to a cafe or a friend's dorm. By 10, messages from her parents began. First routine, then worried. At 10:45, campus shuttle cameras show a driver slowing near Shenley Drive, looking at someone standing by the curb. The footage is grainy, low-lit, but investigators studied it for days. The outline fits roughly, similar height, same umbrella shape, but the image is too blurred for confirmation. No face, no color, no defining mark. What happened between the library and that roadside shadow remains the central question. Investigators considered possibilities. Maybe she accepted a ride. Maybe she slipped, sought shelter, or met someone she knew. Her phone never reconnected, suggesting it was powered off or destroyed soon after the last ping. That detail mattered because Sudiksha, cautious by nature, kept her phone charged and on her person at all times. Police searched the route through the night. Officers walked the wet sidewalks with flashlights, combing ditches, checking benches, trash bins, and bushes near the path. Nothing. No bag, no phone, no shoe prints distinguishable in the rain-softened mud. By dawn, the rain stopped, leaving behind a city washed clean and a trail completely cold. When investigators mapped her digital timeline, they noticed small clues that added depth but not clarity. Her Google activity ended at 8:29 when she searched cardiac anatomy notes. Her weather app updated automatically at 8:36. Her phone battery was at 82%. There was no emergency call, no attempt to contact anyone after leaving the library. That silence disturbed detectives. In many missing person cases, there's panic, movement, a signal, something. Here, nothing. They interviewed everyone who had been in the library that night. Students remembered her sitting quietly, headphones in, papers spread neatly. One said she looked a bit tired but normal. Another recalled her seeing a small smile as she left. No one noticed anyone following her. The bus stop near Shenley Drive recorded no passengers matching her description after 8:45. The next bus arrived at 8:57. Empty. Police also checked local businesses, the cafe, the convenience store, the late-night pizza stand. Each had security footage, none captured her. Some cameras had blind spots, some faced inward, some were fogged by condensation. Technology, so often trusted to record everything, had blinked at the wrong moment. By midnight, officers extended the search radius. Drone sweeps, K-9 units, and park patrols moved through the wooded areas near Panther Hollow. Still nothing. The lack of physical evidence forced investigators into hypotheses. Could she have left intentionally? Her wallet, ID, and keys were missing with her, suggesting she had them when she vanished. But there were no financial transactions afterwards, no travel bookings, no social media login. Her bank account remained untouched. Her digital fingerprint simply stopped. Investigators also looked into the possibility of accident, perhaps a fall near the creek or a misstep on a dark slope. Divers searched water channels, rescue teams combed drainage paths. Days passed, no sign. At the same time, digital analysts built a virtual model of the route, mapping light sources, blind corners, and possible encounter points. They replayed simulated walks, matching average pace and weather conditions. Even in simulation, there were moments of invisibility, stretches where a person could walk unseen for nearly 30 seconds. That window, investigators realized, was long enough for something irreversible to happen. As hours became days, public interest grew. News outlets reported the story, first locally, then nationally. Headlines called it the Pittsburgh vanishing. Social media lit up with theories, some sincere, others reckless. People wanted answers faster than facts could arrive. But inside the investigation room, progress was slow, deliberate. Detectives pinned maps, timestamps, and photographs on whiteboards. Every minute of her last known movements was reconstructed. 8 p.m. leaving the study table, 8:15 texting Alina, 8:37 exiting library, 8:46 last phone ping. 9 minutes of darkness that swallowed a life. The timeline ended with silence, but silence speaks. It speaks of interruption. Something broke the continuity of her routine, and whatever that was, left no visible mark. For investigators, those final hours became an obsession. Each night they replayed the rain-soaked footage, the empty sidewalks, the faint reflection of an umbrella, trying to see something the lens might have caught but the human eye missed. A shadow, a light, a gesture. Yet, nothing new appeared. By the end of that first week, police labeled the case critical missing, suspicious circumstances. That phrase, clinical and cold, meant what everyone feared. This was no simple disappearance. And as the official search intensified,
Hope and dread began to intertwine. The city, once ordinary, now felt changed. The park where students used to walk freely at night grew quiet. Every bench, every lamppost seemed to whisper the same question. How could someone so visible, so careful, simply disappear into the rain?
When the night passed and the sun rose over Pittsburgh on March 7th, 2025, the air felt unusually still. The rain had ended, but the ground was slick, the city glistening under a pale morning light. For most, it was just another Friday, but for a small circle of friends, one family, and a growing number of police officers, the day had already turned into a race against time. Sudiksha Konanki had not come home. She hadn't called, her phone was off, her bed untouched, her books still stacked neatly on her desk. The morning silence inside her apartment was heavy, unnatural, the kind that presses against your chest. Her roommate Lauren knocked on her door again and again, half expecting a tired voice to answer, half hoping this was all a misunderstanding. It wasn't. By 7:30 a.m., Lauren called campus security. The report was short, factual, routine. Student has not returned home, phone unreachable since last night. Within an hour, a patrol unit arrived. The officer asked questions, checked the common areas, then notified local police. And just like that, the search began. At first, it felt procedural. A missing person check, the kind filed dozens of times a year on college campuses. But within hours, it became clear this was not ordinary. There was no activity on her phone, no ATM use, no social media login. For someone as structured as Sudiksha, that absence was the first real clue. Her parents were notified by early afternoon. They left New Jersey immediately, driving 6 hours in silence. Every mile closer to Pittsburgh, the reality grew heavier. By the time they reached the city that evening, the apartment was already taped off, not as a crime scene, but as a precaution. Officers moved quietly through her belongings, documenting what they saw. Her backpack was gone, her wallet missing, her umbrella too. Her laptop sat open on the desk, battery drained overnight. On the screen, frozen in time, was an anatomy diagram she'd been studying. Detective Ryan Callahan later said, "The moment we walked into her room, we felt two things: order and interruption. Everything in its place except her." The initial search focused on the area between the library and Shenley Drive, the route she should have taken home. It wasn't far, but it might as well have been a labyrinth. Pittsburgh's campus sits between open parkland and winding city streets, with countless paths cutting through trees and quiet corners. Officers canvassed the route on foot, retracing every possible turn. By noon, they had teams searching drainage ditches, walking trails, and the shallow creek that ran behind the park. The rain from the night before had muddied the ground, washing away most footprints. Volunteers soon joined in. Students who barely knew her came forward to help, printing posters, combing nearby blocks, and sharing her photo across social media. #FindSudisha began trending locally within hours. The picture that circulated showed her in a light blue sweater, smiling softly at the camera, calm, focused, unaware that it would become her missing person image. By evening, dozens of officers, students, and volunteers fanned out in groups. They searched bus stops, parking lots, alleyways, and the edge of Shenley Park, calling her name into the cold air. Each call echoed for a moment, then dissolved into silence. Police dogs joined the search, following scent traces from the library door to the sidewalk outside, and then losing it completely. The rain had washed the trail away. Investigators turned to surveillance. The university provided access to its network of over 300 cameras. Detectives sat in a dark room for hours, watching the grainy footage on looping screens. Dozens of students leaving the library, umbrellas, backpacks, faces blurred by water streaks on the lenses. They slowed the playback frame by frame, looking for her distinct patterned umbrella. They spotted her once, at 8:37 p.m., exiting the library doors. Then she vanished from every other camera in the area, as if the rain had swallowed her. Detective Callahan described it later in a press conference. "We watched every angle, North Gate, East Path, the Commons intersection. She walks out, and after that, nothing. No camera picks her up. None. It's like the moment she leaves the frame, she's gone." That footage became the center of the investigation. Forensic analysts enhanced it, adjusted contrast, and filtered the audio, though there was little sound besides rain. They measured her stride, confirmed the umbrella, and checked the clock. 8:37 p.m. That timestamp would anchor every future timeline. Meanwhile, search teams expanded outward. The nearby rivers were checked by divers. Helicopters equipped with thermal cameras scanned wooded areas. Canine units from neighboring counties were brought in. Night after night, they searched, and each morning they came back empty-handed. By the second day, the story had reached every local news outlet. TV anchors spoke of the Pittsburgh student mystery, their words echoing through quiet dorms where students watched in disbelief. On campus, fear crept in. Classrooms buzzed with rumor and speculation. Parents called their children hourly. Female students avoided walking alone after sunset. The once busy library path felt eerily silent at night. As public concern grew, police held a press briefing. Standing in front of the station, Detective Callahan spoke clearly, carefully. He explained that they were treating the disappearance as suspicious and urged anyone with information to come forward. Behind him, the missing person poster fluttered slightly in the wind. Sudiksha's eyes, printed large and sharp, seemed to follow the cameras. The community response was overwhelming. Hundreds attended a candlelit vigil that Saturday evening. Students stood shoulder to shoulder, candles in hand, faces illuminated by the soft orange glow. Her parents were there too, standing silently, holding each other. When her mother spoke, her voice trembled but did not break. "She is kind, she is strong, and she is loved. Please help bring her home." Her words spread across the city that night, broadcast on every local channel, replayed again and again. And for a moment, it felt like everyone in Pittsburgh was looking for one missing girl. Tips began pouring in. A driver thought he saw someone matching her description near the park the next morning. A jogger reported finding an umbrella near the trail. Each lead was checked, logged, analyzed. The umbrella turned out to belong to someone else. The driver's memory was inconsistent. False leads piled up faster than real ones, and with each disappointment, frustration grew. Investigators also checked rideshare logs, Uber, Lyft, local taxi dispatches, looking for trips starting near the library between 8:30 and 9. Nothing matched. No unusual pickups, no cash rides, no missing entries. Her friends sat through long interviews, recounting every detail of that week, every word, every plan, every message. Each time they told the story, it became harder to accept that a routine night had become an unsolved mystery. Detectives began working 18-hour shifts, whiteboards filled with names, times, arrows, and photographs, each pin connected to another, forming a map of what was known and what wasn't. The line between 8:37 and 8:46 remained empty. 9 minutes. 9 minutes no one could explain. By the end of the first week, fatigue began to set in. The city had given everything it could, volunteers, resources, attention. But still, there was no sign of Sudiksha. Detectives faced the grim reality that every day without new evidence widened the distance between search and recovery. And yet, no one gave up. Her parents stayed in Pittsburgh, visiting the police station daily, talking to the media, and walking the search routes themselves. Her father carried a printed map folded in his pocket, edges worn from overuse. Her mother placed candles by the library entrance each night, whispering a prayer before leaving. The human heart refuses to stop hoping, even when logic begins to fade. As the first week turned to two, the search became both wider and quieter. Fewer reporters, fewer volunteers, but the same urgency in every step of those who remained. They still called her name, softly, into the still night air. And though no one answered, they kept walking, believing, if only for a moment, that somewhere beyond the rain and silence, she might still hear them.
By the third week of the investigation, the case of Sudiksha Konanki had begun to weigh heavily on everyone involved. Detectives moved slower now, not from fatigue, but from caution, the kind that grows when every lead has already led nowhere. The early energy of the search had settled into something quieter, more deliberate, as the investigation turned from finding to understanding. The first real clue, or what appeared to be one, came from technology. Forensic analysts finally finished decrypting the data from the university's Wi-Fi system. Every device that connected that night left behind a trail, a digital fingerprint of when it came online and when it disconnected. Sudiksha's phone had joined the campus network at 5:43 p.m., right as she entered the library, and left it at 8:39. That lined up perfectly with the last footage of her walking out. But then, something odd. Her phone connected again, briefly, at 8:46 to a private signal near Shenley Drive. Investigators traced that signal to a router registered to a nearby maintenance building. It wasn't unusual, but it was unusual enough. A maintenance employee was questioned. He remembered being on duty that night, but said he didn't see anyone near the building. The small router was an open network. It might have caught her phone as she passed by. Nothing sinister, just a proximity blip. Still, it reminded investigators that she had made it at least that far. She'd reached the edge of the park. After that, the data stopped completely.
The second possible clue came from a taxi driver. He reported seeing a young woman standing near a bus shelter at around 9 p.m., alone, holding an umbrella. He remembered because she looked indecisive, as if she couldn't decide whether to hail him or wait for someone else. He drove by, slowed down, but the woman didn't move. When he circled back 5 minutes later, she was gone. The description was vague: dark coat, medium height, black umbrella. Enough to raise interest, but not enough to confirm identity. Investigators checked dash cam footage. The rain had blurred the windshield. No usable image. Then there was the rumor, the kind that always finds its way into unsolved cases. An online post claimed Sudiksha had argued with someone days before her disappearance. Another claimed she had been followed. Detectives checked both. Neither was true. Friends, classmates, and professors described her life as calm, her interactions kind. No known enemies, no conflict. But rumors spread faster than facts, and soon social media was flooded with theories. Some claimed she'd run away, others whispered darker things. Investigators had to remind the public that speculation could harm the real search. They asked for restraint and for facts, not fear. Still, behind closed doors, detectives considered every possibility. They made 3 internal profiles: voluntary disappearance, accidental death, and criminal involvement. The first, voluntary disappearance, faded quickly. Her life left no sign of preparation. No packed bags, no cash withdrawals, no travel searches, no goodbye messages. Everything about her suggested intention to return home. The second, accidental, seemed more plausible. Perhaps she slipped on the wet ground near the park, fell into a hidden ditch, or entered a restricted area. Search dogs and drones had already covered those zones, but in rain-softened terrain, Small bodies of water and storm drains can conceal more than the eye can see. Rescue divers checked every inlet, every culvert, every tunnel. Nothing.
That left the third, criminal involvement. And that possibility changed the tone of everything. Detectives began examining registered vehicles that passed through the area around that time. Traffic cameras caught several cars between 8:40 and 9 p.m. Most belonged to local residents, confirmed and cleared, but one, a dark gray sedan, drove the same route 3 times within 15 minutes. Its license plate was partly obscured by mud. Investigators ran enhancement software, narrowing it down to 4 potential matches. Each owner was interviewed. One lived out of state, another was a delivery driver with GPS proof of location. The remaining 2 led nowhere. It was another line that ended in silence. In the background, forensics continued quietly. Soil samples from near Shenley Drive were collected, tested for traces of fabric or metal. A fragment of cloth found near a storm drain briefly drew attention. Dark, water-damaged, possibly part of a jacket. DNA results came back inconclusive. The fibers were too degraded by rain to match anything definitively. Week after week, these near discoveries flickered like matches, tiny sparks of hope that quickly went out. Each one took a toll. On detectives, on family, on the community. Detective Callahan later said in an interview, "In a missing person case, silence becomes the loudest clue. You start listening for what isn't there. No bank activity, no phone, no credit card. When a person disappears and leaves behind no noise, it usually means someone else made the silence for them." That sentence lingered in every report that followed. By the 4th week, the FBI offered limited assistance. Data specialists, behavioral analysts, and mapping experts. They reconstructed Sudiksha's final known route in 3D, overlaying security grids and light sources. Their simulation revealed something chilling. Between the library and Shenley Drive, there was a 53-second stretch of unlit pathway completely hidden from all cameras. 53 seconds. A gap in visibility. In an ordinary city, that would mean nothing. In this case, it meant everything. Analysts theorized that if she encountered someone there, even briefly, there would be no visual record of it. They began checking registered offenders, known stalkers, anyone recently reported for suspicious behavior near campus. Dozens of names were reviewed, most eliminated, but a few raised eyebrows. A delivery contractor with prior trespassing charges. A former student who'd been banned from the library for harassment. Both were questioned, both denied involvement, both had alibis that held up under scrutiny. Every time a lead looked promising, it unraveled. The investigation became a series of dead ends that felt almost designed. Callahan described it best: the harder we looked, the less there was to find.
Meanwhile, the online world built its own story. Podcasts, Reddit threads, and amateur detectives started filling gaps with imagination. Some claimed hidden footage existed. Others pointed to unrelated crimes in nearby cities. The noise grew so loud it began to drown out the facts. The police department even released a public statement, reminding citizens that misinformation could derail the investigation. But even that warning couldn't slow it down. Inside the Konanki family's small hotel room, hope and exhaustion sat side by side. Sudiksha's parents spent their days at the police station and their nights scrolling through comments, looking for truth among speculation. Every message that began with, "I think I saw her," became a thread of temporary hope. Every false alarm felt like a loss all over again. After 40 days, the official task force phase of the search ended, not because they wanted to stop, but because there were no more leads to chase. The case shifted from active search to open investigation. Files boxed, evidence stored, but never forgotten.
Still, detectives continued on personal time. Callahan, in particular, refused to let it fade. He rewatched the footage hundreds of times. Each time, he noticed something new: a flicker of light, a passing shadow, a reflection in a puddle. Nothing that solved the case, but enough to keep him looking. He said later, "Sometimes the answer isn't in the footage, it's in what we refuse to stop seeing." For the community, the lack of closure was its own kind of fear. Students grew cautious. Parents became anxious. Local media occasionally revisited the story, showing her photograph with the caption, "Still missing." Every time it aired, the wound reopened. In the absence of answers, the mind fills the void with theories. Some said she'd been lured by someone pretending to need help. Others thought she might have slipped and been swept away unseen. Some whispered about organized crime or human trafficking or a secret life she'd never revealed. None of those ideas had evidence, but they all had one thing in common: desperation. People needed a reason, even if it wasn't the right one. And yet, the truth, if truth still exists somewhere in the folds of that night, remains silent. 9 minutes, 53 seconds of missing time. Dozens of cameras, hundreds of people nearby, and not a single confirmed witness to her final steps. Sometimes mysteries don't roar into existence, they whisper. They happen quietly in the blind spots between light and rain, and they leave behind nothing but questions that echo in the minds of everyone who cared. By the end of April, Pittsburgh moved on outwardly, but not inwardly. The posters faded in the rain, but they were replaced each week by someone who couldn't let go. The candles burned out, but others were lit in their place. And under the city's ordinary hum, a name lingered. A name spoken softly in prayers, in police briefings, in late-night conversations, when people still asked, "How does someone disappear like that?"
When a person vanishes, it's not just one life that disappears. It's 100 small routines that fall silent. Every voice message that doesn't come, every seat that stays empty, every light that doesn't turn on when evening comes. For those left behind, time splits in two: the life before and the waiting after. For the Konanki family, that waiting became a slow, unbearable rhythm. Days started early, filled with phone calls, press interviews, and police updates that rarely brought new information. Nights were quieter, heavy with the sound of unanswered questions. They had come to Pittsburgh hoping for a short visit to bring their daughter home. Instead, they found themselves trapped in a city where every street, every corner seemed to whisper her name. Her mother rarely slept. She kept a photo of Sudiksha beside her bed, lit by a small lamp that never turned off. Every morning she made tea for two, out of habit, then poured one cup down the sink. Her father spent most days at the police station, asking questions he already knew the answers to, hoping that maybe, just maybe, today something had changed. But it never did. Detective Callahan would later say, "Some families fight with anger, others fight with silence. The Konankis fought with hope. They never let go of the idea that she was out there somewhere." Hope, though, is a double-edged thing. It keeps you alive, but it also keeps you from resting. The family lived between optimism and despair, never long enough in either to feel certainty. On campus, the emotional ripple was just as powerful. The University of Pittsburgh had seen students come and go for decades, but never something like this:
A disappearance without reason, without evidence, without closure. It changed the atmosphere in subtle, lasting ways. In the weeks that followed, classes resumed, exams continued, and yet the usual energy was gone. Students spoke softer in hallways. Study groups that used to meet in the library corners now sat closer to the exits. Late-night walks became a rarity. Campus security increased patrols, added lights, and installed new cameras. But fear lingers in places where logic can't erase it. Vigils continued every weekend, sometimes 10 people, sometimes 100. Candles lined the library steps, each one flickering like a heartbeat in the dark. People left letters, drawings, flowers. Some wrote prayers, others wrote promises. One note left anonymously read, "We never met, but I walked the path you walked. I'll keep it lit until you come back."
That was the kind of impact Sudiksha left, even among strangers. She wasn't famous, she wasn't loud, but she mattered. And when someone who matters disappears, the space they leave becomes impossible to ignore. Counselors began visiting classrooms, offering quiet conversations. Some students cried, others just sat silently. In grief, not everyone speaks the same language. For some, silence is the language. The administration created a scholarship in her name, small but symbolic, for women in pre-medical studies who showed dedication and empathy. Her parents were told about it. They cried softly when the email came, proud that her name would live on, even if she didn't return. Meanwhile, the police kept working in the background. A few detectives still revisited her case in spare hours, comparing notes, rereading interviews. Even when a file is labeled cold, it doesn't mean forgotten. It just means quiet. And quiet, in its own way, can still mean hope. One evening, about 2 months after the disappearance, a group of students gathered near Shenley Drive, the last place she was known to have walked. They lit candles, placed them along the path, and stood together without speaking. It wasn't a vigil this time. It was something different, a statement that she was still part of their community, that the world hadn't moved on. Among the crowd was her friend Alina, the one who'd last texted her that night. She said later, "I used to think grief came when you lost someone, but it's different when you don't know, when you don't have an ending. It's like trying to breathe without finishing the exhale." For many, that described the feeling exactly, the not knowing, the stillness that never settles. The city itself felt that way too. The story had reached national media by then. Small segments on evening news, online articles, podcasts that tried to piece the case together. Each retelling drew more attention, but also more speculation. The Konanki family chose to stay quiet. They appeared only once on television, not to plead, not to dramatize, but to remind people that behind the theories and the headlines was a daughter, a student, a human being. Her father said simply, "Please don't turn my child into a mystery. She is our life. Find her, and then tell the story." That line silenced even the reporters. In time, the case became part of the city's quiet memory, the kind of thing people mention in low voices, the kind that never really goes away. New students arrived, old ones graduated, and yet her name remained on the missing board at the student center. The photo had been replaced twice, each time with the same soft smile. On the anniversary of her disappearance, hundreds gathered again. It was raining, a soft, steady drizzle that blurred the candlelight and made the umbrellas glisten. Someone whispered, "It's the same weather as that night." And for a brief moment, the crowd seemed to freeze, united by memory and by something deeper than understanding.
Detective Callahan was there too, standing quietly at the edge of the crowd. He never spoke publicly that night, but someone who saw him said he kept looking down the road toward the park, as if expecting her to walk out of the shadows any minute. Maybe that's what everyone secretly hoped, that somehow the story could still find its way back to the beginning, that the rain could return what it took. Hope can be cruel, but it's also human. It's the one thing no disappearance can erase. In the end, Sudiksha's case became more than an investigation. It became a mirror, a reflection of how fragile safety feels, how deep love runs, and how silence can echo louder than sound. It taught a campus and a city to pay attention, to each other, to small details, to the moments before goodbye. Her mother once said in an interview, "Every day, I imagine her coming home, the key turning in the door, her voice saying, 'I'm back.' I live that moment again and again, because hope is all I have left." And maybe that's what keeps the story alive, not just the mystery, but the love that refuses to end. Because behind every missing person case, beyond the headlines and police reports, there are people who keep the lights on, people who keep setting one cup of tea beside the other, just in case, people who keep believing, even when reason tells them not to. And sometimes that belief, quiet, persistent, unshakable, is the only thing that stands between despair and grace. In the stillness of Pittsburgh nights, when the rain falls softly and the streets glimmer once again, some say you can still feel it, that lingering hope carried on the sound of water and memory, a reminder that she mattered, that she was loved, and that even in absence, her story continues to be told. The story of Sudiksha Konanki does not end in the rain. It lives on, quietly, in the people who refuse to forget her. Months have passed since that March night, yet the questions remain the same. Where did she go? What happened between the library doors and the edge of Shenley Drive? And how, in a city filled with cameras, with students, with light, can someone still disappear without leaving a trace? For investigators, those questions never really close. Files remain open, evidence preserved, data revisited whenever new technology makes another kind of analysis possible. Every few months, detectives review the footage again, not because they expect something new to appear, but because sometimes, after enough time has passed, the mind sees differently. Perspective changes, and sometimes that change is enough to uncover what was once invisible. Detective Callahan still keeps her case file on his desk. He's been assigned to other investigations since, but he admits he looks back at hers more often than he should. He says, quietly, "You don't forget certain faces, not because of what happened to them, but because of what they represented. Innocence, hard work, and the ordinary goodness we all take for granted." For her family, life has divided permanently, before and after. They still visit Pittsburgh every few months. They meet with police. They walk the same path she once walked. They place flowers by the library entrance. Her mother still writes letters addressed to her daughter. She never mails them, but she just keeps them in a box. She says writing helps her remember that hope, though fragile, is still alive. Her father continues to attend awareness events, quietly speaking to other families who face the same silence. He doesn't speak with anger. He speaks with empathy. He knows what it means to wake each morning into the same unanswered question. He says, if we stop caring about one missing person, we lose a part of what makes us human. That sentiment grew into something larger than the investigation itself. Students, professors, and community members began organizing small gatherings under one simple idea: that awareness is action, that silence helps no one, and that every voice, no matter how small, adds to the search for truth. They called it the Light Walk. Once every semester, students walked the same route Sudiksha took,
from Hillman Library to Shenley Drive, each carrying a single candle. No speeches, no cameras, no spectacle. Just quiet footsteps in the night and the sound of rain against umbrellas. A reminder that even when someone vanishes, their presence still moves through the world in other ways, through compassion, through remembrance, through unity. The university, in collaboration with her family, also established a fund, not for reward, but for safety initiatives. Better lighting, emergency call boxes, student escorts for late-night walks. It wasn't a grand gesture, but it was meaningful. Because justice, when it can't come through answers, sometimes begins with prevention. For the investigators, this case became a lesson in humility. That not all mysteries are solved in weeks or months or even years. Some require time, patience, and the persistence of memory. Callahan once said, "You can't rush the truth. Sometimes the truth waits until we're ready to hear it." And maybe that's true, because even now, every few weeks, a new tip arrives. A possible sighting, vague memory, an anonymous message. Mostly nowhere. But each one means someone, somewhere, is still thinking of her. And that, in itself, matters. For the people of Pittsburgh, Sudiksha's story became a quiet symbol of empathy. It reminded the city that tragedy does not belong to one family alone. It belongs to all of us, who share the same streets, the same classrooms, the same fragile sense of safety. It reminded them that unity is not born from answers, but from care. When darkness falls on a community, people respond in different ways. Some demand justice loudly. Others light candles and whisper prayers. Both are acts of resistance against forgetting. And maybe that's the most important thing this story teaches. That remembering is itself a form of justice. That speaking a missing person's name keeps them alive in the only way the world still allows. So tonight, if you are listening, take a moment. Picture a quiet path, wet from rain, streetlights glowing like distant stars. Picture a young woman walking home, her umbrella tilting against the wind, her steps calm, unaware that the world around her is about to change. Picture her smile, ordinary, human, real. And let that image stay with you, even as the story fades into silence. Because someone, somewhere, knows something. And maybe someday that person will speak. Maybe they'll remember a sound, or a face, or a shadow that didn't belong. Maybe that memory, however small, will be the thread that unravels everything. If you know anything, say something. Reach out to law enforcement, submit an anonymous tip, or share a detail that might matter. Even a single word can shift the course of an investigation.
For those who have lost someone, for those still waiting, and for those who still believe, let this story remind you that unity is strength, that a community that refuses to stay silent becomes a force greater than fear. Sudiksha's case, though unsolved, has already changed lives. It has made people more cautious, more compassionate, and more aware. It has shown that even in the absence of closure, love continues to act. Her mother once said in an interview, "Justice isn't only about punishment, it's about truth and remembrance and kindness." Those words echo far beyond this case, because every time someone shares her story, every time someone chooses awareness over apathy, her voice, quiet as it once was, speaks again. It reminds us that behind every headline, there's a person. Behind every mystery, a family. Behind every statistic, a name. And that name deserves to be remembered. Sudiksha Konanki, a daughter, a friend, a student. A light that didn't go out. It simply moved beyond our sight. So as this episode comes to an end, let her story remind us of something larger. The truth does not die in silence,
and compassion does not fade in darkness. That communities united are impossible to ignore, and that somewhere out there, in the quiet places between rain and memory, someone is still listening, someone is still searching, and someone still believes that justice, even if delayed, will come.